Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhignaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We enter the 27th chapter of the 11th Skandha of Bhagavatam. Uddhava Gita continues, and Uddhava now poses a question. After hearing the glory of satsang in the last chapter, now Uddhava asks a question about the discipline of deity worship, which is a new topic, and Uddhava wants to clarify from Krishna what is the right process of deity worship, what manner to do it, what purpose to do it, and so on. All the great sages such as Narada and Vyasa have glorified it. You have yourself taught it to Brahma, and it is suitable for all people of all grades and stages of life, and therefore please describe it to me, he asks Krishna. So Krishna replies by saying, the branch of Vedas dealing with rituals is so vast and unlimited in scope, the Karma Kanda as it is called. But that being said, I will describe it to you in a very compact or concise way. He says, Sankshiptam Varnaishyami. I will describe it to you in a compact way. It can be either done in the Vedic way or the Tantric way or a mixture of both. So, hear from me, and Krishna now describes the way to do the deity worship. So, he says, first one has to go through the right process of growing up, studying the Vedas and so on for whoever is qualified to do so. And then, full of devotion, one has to revere the father, the teacher, and then me, and worship with various articles, and most importantly, with a sincere, guileless heart. That is the most important thing. And he says the deity worship can be done in many ways. It can be done in the form of an image, an actual physical image. It can be done simply in the form of sacred fire. It can be simply worshipping the sun as a deity. It can be worshipping water, or it can simply, in the most subtlest form, worshipping the cavity of the heart. So, in whichever way one does it, Krishna says one has to first purify oneself, clean the mouth, clean the body, and so on. And then, while invoking the holy waters, that is especially when cleaning the body while taking bath, invoking the presence of Ganga and so on, and then taking a noble vow, one ought to perform worship by first saying the various prayers like Sandhya prayers and then Gayatri mantra and so on. And then one can do the deity worship. If one chooses to do with an image, Krishna says the image can be made of 8 materials. So it's all described in great detail. The 8 different types of materials in which an image of the Supreme Being can be made are stone, wood, metal, clay, a painting, sand, a precious stone, or the last is the most subtle, a simple conception in the mind. And this deity can be installed in a temple, and the deity can be either movable or immovable. So the movable deity is called Utsava Murti, that which is taken on procession and so on. The immovable deity is the one fixed permanently inside a temple. And either way, Krishna says one can invoke the deity with the various sacred mantras and then worship them with excellent articles. The most important thing is to be free of any selfish motive and worship, and even this can be done with the cavity of the heart with love. So while the image can be installed physically outside, It can already, as mentioned, it can be done simply in the cavity of the heart with sincerity. And whichever way one engages in deity worship, Krishna says one has to maintain the place very cleanly and then invoke the deity with the various right mantras. And then if it's the fire, then one has to offer oblations into the fire. If it is sun, one has to simply show respect to the sun. If it is water, one has to simply offer water. And if it's in the mind, in the cavity of the heart, one has to simply focus within. And whichever way it is done, even if it's simply water, Krishna says that which is offered with sincerity and love is accepted by me. On the other hand, that which is done for pomp and show, even if it's the most opulent form of deity and worship, it's not accepted by me. And then Krishna says the way to worship is to sit normally facing east or north, and then consecrating oneself with the mantra. So there is a way to touch various parts of the body with each mantra invoking Krishna. And then after that, having sandal paste, flowers, water, and so on, to sprinkle the deity with water and to offer the various articles of worship and so on. And then chanting the right mantras along with Gayatri mantra to invoke the deity and envision the Supreme Being Narayana, of whom the one who is worshipping is a parton or a particle, a part of the whole. So Krishna says, then he goes on to say, one can thus worship me in any form by invoking me in that image, installing me with the mantra, and also with the various Shaktis, that is, the potencies which are feminine, as accompanying me. With all of them accompanying me, one can worship me, and thereby one can also offer various articles of worship and food and so on to the deity. One can worship not only my form but also Sudarshana, the chakra, the discus, the Panchajanya, the conch, the mace, Kaumodaki, the sword, the bow, arrows, all the various emblems also of Balaram or Sankarshana. All of this can be invoked for worship along with deities such as Durga, the Divine Mother. And Krishna says, if one has enough wealth, then one can offer more expensive articles of worship such as camphor, saffron, aloe wood, and so on. And one has to chant the various right mantras like Purusha Sukta, Vedas, and so on. And then, if as one has wealth, again one can offer the deity jewels and various ornate clothes and scents and so on. And by doing all this, by various articles of worship, by incense, light, and so on, and then also making good food preparation of milk and ghee and jaggery and seeds and rice and so on, very healthy and very opulent food as one can afford, and thereby one can engage in a wholesome worship, engaging all the senses, and then one can also sing songs and dance, etc., glorifying me, and especially on sacred days such as Ekadashi and so on. Ekadashi is the 11th day of the lunar fortnight, which is very auspicious, and therefore all of these ways in which Krishna says one can engage in worship of the deity. On the other hand, if one is engaging in worship of a sacrificial fire, the deity in the form of fire, then one can build a nice sacrificial pit, grow a sacred fire in it, sprinkle a little water onto the fire, invoke the mantras of Bhur Bhuva Swaha in the fire, and then again envision my form in the fire as if the form of molten gold of Krishna in the fire itself, and visualizing and worshipping me as such, one can cast sacrificial sticks soaked in ghee into the fire and thereby grow the fire and worship Krishna with the fire, again chanting Purusha Sukta, and the Mula Mantra of Narayana, and so on. And in this way, Krishna says, one can worship me either through the deity form or the sacred fire, and also within the cavity of the heart and all the other ways mentioned. And Krishna says, after finishing the worship, one has to recount the glories, the pastimes, the names, and sing and dance and so on, and then offer one's obeisance by falling flat. He says, Tutva prasida bhagavan niti vandeta dandavat. Like a stick, dandavat means like a stick, one has to fall flat, offering his obeisances, and thereby one has to completely surrender oneself in front of the deity, whether the deity is in the form of an image or in the form of a sacrificial fire or just sun or water or any form. One has to offer oneself fully, surrender oneself fully. Krishna therefore says, one can worship me through any of the ways I have mentioned, as long as he has pure reverence, Shraddha, because I am the soul of the universe and I dwell in all beings in their heart. He says, Archadishu yada yatra shraddhamam tatra cha archayet sarvabhuteshu atmani cha sarvatmaham avastitah. He says, one can worship me with shraddha, with reverence, in any form because I abide in the heart of all beings. And worshipping in this way, Krishna says, one secures my presence or realizes my presence in him forever. And furthermore, Krishna says, if one has enough wealth to build a house of worship, not just have a image to worship, a deity to worship, but also if he can build a house of worship around it, a temple, and furthermore, if he can build flower gardens and so on to engage in the necessary paraphernalia for worship, if one does all this, then one is supremely blessed if one has the wealth to do all this. Therefore, Krishna says, as one can afford, one can simply just worship an image or a deity, or one can erect a temple, or one can then not just have a temple but have all the facilities around the temple. Whatever one can do, one can engage in, so that one can develop disinterested, that is, devotion without any desire for me. He says, Mameva nairapekshena bhakti yogena vindati bhakti yogam salabata evam yaf pujayeta mam. So, with pure motiveless devotion, the one who worships me in this way in bhakti yoga realizes me. So, that's the most important thing. And also, Krishna says one has to be very sincere in this worship without any selfish motive for wealth or for show or for name, but simply surrendering oneself and engaging in a very sincere form of worship. One can engage in such formal worship for one who is inclined to do so. So, this is the way of the formal worship of deity that Krishna describes in this chapter to Uddhava. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.